What is up, guys, and welcome to the newest episode of Guarani Vision. Welcome to episode 3 of the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me as well are my 3 great co-hosts, and we'll just get started, really. We'll go into Paraguay with Federico Perez. Fede, how are you, man? How does it feel to be in spring, despite it always being summer, 345 days year long?
Yeah, there's no spring here, Roberto. Hi to you. Hi to Maria. Hi to Ralph. Hi to everybody that is getting used to coming back here to this podcast, to this YouTube channel, wherever you guys are hearing this. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, there's a lot of things to talk about this week. Mainly the public going back to the stadium. We have a couple of Paraguayan players also having a really good week in Copa Libertadores. There's a bunch of things we need to talk about, so let's just go right to it. If you're right on me.
Yeah, definitely. Let's just introduce our other 2 co-hosts who are in Miami and unfortunately might see their team qualify to the NBA Finals, to the chagrin of my team, the Boston Celtics. Hey, Celtics in 7. Certainly it'll probably be over by the time we record this and upload it. But Ralph, Hannah, Maria, Britos, how are you guys?
Hey guys, how's it going? How are you, Roberto? Let's see how it goes tonight. By the way, Miami won last night as well, the Dolphins. So we got FSU on Saturday with the Canes. It's a big week for sports here in Miami.
That's right. It's really an exciting week. And like Ralph said, yesterday was a great win for the Dolphins as well, our first win of the season. So pretty exciting things going on here in Miami. I'm super excited to have you guys as well again. The 3rd episode. It feels like an eternity already for me, at least, but I'm ready to get started. So
definitely, then let's get to it. Fede, you had mentioned this kind of public returning to stadiums. This was always going to be something that had to happen. I think we see it going on in Europe. We see it going on in the United States. We don't really see it as much happening in South America, but let's get into it. Cases are up in Paraguay with COVID-19, but the public may come back to stadiums. What's the latest that you got from there in Paraguay?
Yeah, well, I didn't actually think I was going to hear this so soon, especially seeing that right now in Paraguay, we're at some sort of peak. We could say the numbers are still not going down. COVID-19 is hitting hard. Now, it took some time for it to happen in Paraguay. In other countries, it happens sooner, but it is happening now in Paraguay. We barely got beds for people going to the hospitals. That is an issue. That is the reality here right now in the country. Meanwhile, the authorities, the government, the Paraguayan Football Association, our national association, wants the public to go back to the stadiums. And they've been talking about that ever since the ball started rolling again here in Paraguay. They just said they were going to take it easy. They were going to give it a couple of months. They were going to make sure that the players, that the staff, that everybody involved in the soccer community first did their job well, and then the public will get their space back at the stadiums. And I think we're on that next step right now. We're waiting for that to get confirmed. But we heard this week, especially after Robert Harrison, the president of APF, going into several interviews, he said that the intention is there, that after the Apertura is done, we only have, I think, 2 more matches to go, two weeks to go, actually, on this tournament. And after that, there will be a lot of meetings with the health people from the government, and they will analyze what they did, what they've done right, what they've done wrong, and what are the next steps for everything to go back to normal, or the normal as it can be right now in this world in 2020. The idea is to go to the stadiums, to have 30% of the attendance, 30% of the stadium capacity. That's the idea of Robert Harrison. That's the idea that he's told most of the presidents of the different clubs in First Division. That's the idea right now. that will be for Defensores del Chaco. That will be for the bigger stadiums. That's my question. Is it going to be for all stadiums? Are actually all stadiums are ready for this issue security-wise? We have to think about that also. How is the police going to contain the people? Is it going to be? Are people going to actually behave in the stadiums? Are they going to stay seated like we see in other countries? Well, we're seeing this in Europe happening slowly. But I don't know if we're ready really here in Paraguay. Paraguay was the first league to come back in South America. I think Robert Harrison and everybody that works with him want to be the first on this, also be the first country that brings people back to the stadiums. I have my doubts about it, but the intention is there. If the health people from the government give it a good go, then we'll probably have people back in the stadium for the clausura. Maybe not right away, but eventually October, November, maybe even December. By the end of this tournament, I believe we're going to have people celebrating in the stands the second championship. Not this championship, not Cerro Porteño's probably championship, because this one is going to be without public still. But they want the clausura, they want 2020 to be done with people on the stadiums.
And it's going to be very interesting, and I really obviously want to get your take, Ralph and Maria. But we can obviously see examples that we're seeing in the United States. Obviously, they have a huge amount of cases, but for them, it's all based on the teams in MLS. For example, like some clubs, depending on where their status of COVID is, allowing those decreased amount of fans. I think we see it in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. But compare that to places like New York or any other places. So I'm actually curious as well, because I'll go to Ralph as well, because I think the English part of it as well. I mean, in England, we saw Boris Johnson, I think, said that they're going to delay that kind of opening to fans. And so just assessing of what you're looking at in Paraguay and even taking examples of what we're seeing in Europe, should they follow that model? Or do you feel as if though, because of everything that's still occurring with the rise of cases, and like Perez said, they're still technically on that peak, is it time for them to really go back to that new normal and allow fans at the stadiums?
Hi guys, I'm on mute then. I think it's a very different landscape to Paraguay compared to the US, first of all. I mean, in the US, I think the MLS is kind of working with different states, and each state here in the US has kind of different laws in terms of how many people can be together, what the laws are in terms of wearing masks and what establishments open, the capacities. So there's a bit more freedom depending on the states. Meanwhile, in Paraguay and in England, I think it's a lot more a national law for everybody, especially in Paraguay. Most of the clubs are centered in one city, in Asunción. And if they're not in Asunción, they're in kind of Greater Asunción. So there, with that concentration, it makes more sense to kind of have a blanket rule for everybody. In England, they had this hope that they would go back in October, or around October, the Premier League were looking for, because they don't feel it's sustainable that the Premier League goes a full season without fans, because they need the ticket revenue. That's been shelved for now, because actually Britain as a country took a step back in terms of freedoms and lockdown. They've had to get a bit stricter because they're worried about the rising cases, and also that they're entering winter. There's also a big similarity, I think, with England and Paraguay in terms of the stadiums. So here in the US, most of the stadiums were built for purpose. They're built outside of the city. People can go in their cars. They have huge car parking spaces. The way to get there is you can get there in private transport, and then you would have ample space to kind of get into the stadium. In both England and Paraguay, because they're much more historic stadiums, usually they're kind of within suburbs or within the city. So let's take La Hoya for Cerro. I mean, you actually go down quite a really narrow street off Quinta to be able to get into the stadium. And that's what I would be thinking is more of a concern, is not once you're inside those big stadiums, there's plenty of space, you're kind of as safe, I would say, as you are in a restaurant or in a local park or something. But it's how do you get those people in there? How do you funnel all those people in there when those stadiums were kind of They were built for people to be walking into there from the local area. You know, there's not usually kind of these big car parks that surround the stadium, which you see here in the US. So I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, is, and it's like Fede was mentioning, how do the police control this? Also, in one difference between England and Paraguay is also the barra. So in England, the clubs are owned pretty much, you know, by a board of directors. The fans don't have a say in who is owned. In Paraguay, the barra are very important because actually the fans help vote for the presidents of the club, and they have a more influence, let's say, in the club's day-to-day. So I don't know how they're going to say, okay, there's only 30% of Olimpia fans can go to the stadium. Well, La Barra would make up maybe at least 10% of that, and they're going to say, we need to go. So I can see there's definitely a bigger challenge for Paraguay in terms of, one, how do you get the people in the stadiums? And then who do you let in? Because they don't have as a structured membership, like let's say I'll take Arsenal because that's the club my family are members at in the UK. I mean, you're on a point system. So it would be fairly easy for them to say, okay, we'll go on like a loyalty scheme system or something. Whereas in Paraguay, how are they going to distribute these tickets? Is it first come, first served? If they do that, you're going to have huge queues outside the few places that sell tickets, and then you've created an issue even before the game. So for me, there's a lot of questions. I mean, I really hope they can get fans into the stadium because we miss it. But I think there's definitely some challenges there that I'd be interested to hear how Harrison and the APF are going to manage that.
Maria, I really want you to also go into that. I think certainly there are challenges. There are pros and cons in all of this. Certainly the behavior of the fans is always an interesting part in terms of how they will deal with this. And given with the cases rising, they don't want to take the risk despite them wanting to go to games. So I just want your thoughts on, is this a good idea to allow fans back to the stadium even at a decreased rates, or is it too soon?
Well, honestly, I think it's definitely too soon, especially for Paraguay, and considering their limitations in security, and like Rolf was saying, talking about the smaller areas that the stadium has. But who are we to control, you know, the fans? Let's say it does happen. Let's say, you know, the stadiums are allowed to have the 30% capacity. How are we, or how is the clubs going to control the people not social distancing? And even just controlling people having their mask on is a huge dilemma nowadays everywhere around the world. So I doubt that it's going to work as well as the president of the federation believes it will work. I do like his positivity, but to be honest, it's just a lot of people. 30% is a lot of capacity. I would consider just having just the members, like Raf was saying, which is about 10% possibly, which is a good idea in my opinion. But I just think it's just too soon. It's still the peak in Paraguay, and I wanted to also compare here to the United States and how the NBA and the MLS have put all their players and all their coaches, refs in a bubble, and it has worked really well. I don't think that it had any sort of negative part of it, but I'm not sure how Paraguay would look into that. It could, I guess the money could be an issue, but if they really want to do it, I think that maybe it's a possibility. Maybe have just a small amount of people.
You know, I want to give two examples that happened this last week, Roberto. One was when Cerro Porteño had to go to Libertad Stadium, and there was a whole bunch of people, car behind car of people wanting just to follow, just to see their players. You can't hold back the people. I think that's very important about what Maria was saying. And we saw something similar in Copa Libertadores during the week when Olimpia went to Buenos Aires, where we know there's a huge community of Paraguayans. We have a lot of Paraguayans that live there, that they've lived there almost all their lives. Some of them even were born there, and they want to see Olympia. They wanted to be close to the players, and they couldn't be held back. They went straight to the bus. They were right there next to the hotel. I think people are getting tired of being held back, and they just want to go at it. So maybe that's the way. This is the way of the government, of the people that have the power, of telling them, well, maybe you can be a little bit closer also.
And I think it would be unjust to compare what they're doing in Paraguay to what they're doing in countries like England, like the United States, where there's obviously much more people and are much more organized in a way. But yeah, I mean, I don't think, like as you mentioned, a bubble would not work in Paraguay. I think that's too much money, and there's like it can't work. And again, you can't really control these guys. I mean, as you said, you know, a team that obviously didn't win the league on the weekend, but they're still going to go out and you know, support their team and give them a welcome. It's you can't stop them, even there or in Argentina. And when the bigger games happen, like assuming that they qualify for the next stage of the Libertadores and they have these big games at their home stadium, they clearly want to go all out and support these guys. So it's really out of their control anyway. But I really do appreciate how they're trying to get something done similar to what they're doing in other countries. But I just think, as Ralph mentioned, there's just a lot of obstacles that the country has to deal with that it won't work in the way possible. So again, and this also has to depend on what happens on rates of the coronavirus.
Let's be realistic. Cerro Porteño, Olimpia, Luqueño, Guarani. You guys can tell me another team that brings a lot of people to the stadiums, but I think it's only those 4 teams that really draw people into the stadiums. I think those are the 4 clubs that should be working close to see what people are going to go, what filters are going to go, like Rob said, what filters are going to be used to know exactly who needs to come, who's going to be on the next game. That's probably the big issue right now, and controlling the people once they're inside the stadium. There's a lot of work to do. This is not going to be an easy situation in South America itself, just because of how passionate we are.
Yeah, definitely. It's so difficult to control, and there's only so much that we can really see the government doing. So we'll just have to wait and see and what kind of developments are made. But speaking of, obviously you mentioned those teams, Fed, it's a good segue into a couple of news that occurred. And no, it does not have to involve a player, but it involves a coach. It involves the sacking of Ramon Diaz after their loss to Caracas in the Copa Libertadores. In comes Gustavo Morínigo. Ralph, I'll go to you on this one. Certainly, Libertad are still in a position to qualify to the next round of the Libertadores. It's going to be very difficult for them to do so. But was this the right decision? Was it too soon? Or do you feel that everything that had occurred for Libertad ever since the return of football in the pandemic led to this decision?
Well, I think whether it's the right decision or not, I guess we'll find out, because we saw that Libertad started so well under Ramon Diaz, and actually he leaves with kind of a decent record of, I think his winning percentage was like 64%. So he didn't do so bad over the course of the year. But what's happened is, since the break, the kind of return to football, they've thrown away the lead in the league, and then they've really struggled in their first 2 Libertadores games. You could kind of maybe forgive them for Boca, saying, okay, it's Boca, and you know they're one of the strongest squads you've got in South America, but they were playing at home, so they would have hoped for more. But then to go to Caracas, take the lead, and end up losing, I think that was kind of almost inexcusable, thinking of the position that Libertad had been at before the break. I think Morínigo is a very smart coach. He's definitely a good filler, because I'll be honest, I think Libertad will be they usually look to coaches from abroad. And I would say this, for next year, 2021, unless Morínigo wins the Clausura or something, then they could be going somewhere else. But I think he's definitely a smart coach. He's been coaching a lot with youngsters in Paraguay. He worked with the under-17s, the under-20s. He had some time at Nacional, where they actually got to the Copa Libertadores final. He's also worked at Cerro Porteño. So he has that experience. He played in Libertad as a player. And I think he's someone that for sure knows a lot of the players, especially from his time with the national team, that he can quickly get them on board and try and salvage something going into these kind of crunch games of the Libertadores. And then I'm sure he will guide them through the Clausura. And then Libertad will, depending on that performance, they'll make a decision in 2021 of do they go big for a foreign coach again? Because let's be honest, Ramon Diaz does not come cheap. I mean, he's probably was one of the highest paid managers in South America. So I mean, Libertad might look to again go for that big investment come next year.
And then definitely with the power that someone like Horacio Cartes has, they definitely have the financial game to get any name similar to what Ramon Diaz is at Libertad. So we'll see if this is a more of an interim position for Morínigo or a permanent one. We'll see. I mean, his track record said so. But Maria, now going to you on Olimpia. Certainly this side didn't impress as much as they did in their game against Defensa y Justicia. They ended up playing with 10 men. We saw Pita score on his debut, on his first start, but ultimately they couldn't get the job done. I know, and I see things that are going on Twitter. I'm sure you guys are seeing it as well, that we see a lot of players also departing the side, and maybe some people are starting to get fed up at Daniel Garnero, which is surprising given all that he's done in the last couple of years. But while they're still in a position to technically qualify, they know that failure is not an option and they have to win these next two games. And given how they've slipped up in the league as well, is this a case where, in your opinion, Maria, that if they don't qualify to the next round of the Libertadores and whatever happens in the league happens, that it is the end of the road for Garnero?
Well, I definitely don't think so. He's barely been there 2 years, so I think we can give him more of a chance to maybe prove that he has it. He has the capacity to take Olimpia into higher competitions as well and win more competitions. Look, I mean, it's not an easy job to lead a team, but he did win the last couple of years. He's had a good run with Copa Libertadores. Playing against these teams in Copa Libertadores was not an easy task as well. Last time that they played Santos which was one of their bigger competitors in the group stage. I just don't think that people are getting more frustrated just because of a couple of matches. I can understand the Apertura side that they haven't won this, but maybe they win the Clausura. Who knows? He can turn this around, maybe like Cerro did. So we'll see. I think he still needs a little bit more of a chance to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. Should people give Garnero more of a chance and see what happens at the end of the year? Or do you feel that whatever happens in the Libertadores, people might say, no, not good enough?
I mean, in the real world, I think Garnero's earned enough credit to have one bad tournament. But in the nature of Paraguayan football, if we think of a manager, I'm trying to think of somebody who's even been as long as he has, even though 2 years is very short in kind of European terms, or definitely MLS terms, where some of these managers are staying despite horrendous results, but I won't mention Matias Almeida's name, is that we're seeing that that there's a lot of frustration, and there's this kind of desire of Olympia. Yeah, but we have to win the Libertadores, because it's almost like, okay, we've won 4 seasons in a row. Now this is the kind of time where we kick on and win the Libertadores, because that's been the history of Olympia. So I do think there's a lot of pressure on him, but I do feel in the same sense as Maria that it's not really a sensible decision to get rid of this coach based on this, and this kind of run of games. That said, it then will come down to, okay, who do we want? They need to rebuild, right? They've lost a few players. I think losing Mendieta has proved to be a big loss, because they don't really find some of that creativity in those difficult games, which, you know, like against Defensa y Justicia, was like, who was that player that's going to come off the bench and give you creativity? So do they go through that whole rebuilding process with Garnero? And also, does Garnero want to go through a whole rebuilding process? Or does he want to say, hey, I won 4 titles in a row, I'm going back to Argentina, or maybe even up to MLS or to Liga MX, because he could say, well, with this, you know, with what I've done here, I'm going to go to a new league and maybe to a big club in one of those leagues.
Definitely. I think it's very impressive that, and Fede, of course, you can jump in if you have anything
I
to say.
wanted to say that, you know, I'm not agreeing with Maria. I think people are not that patient here anymore with Garnero. You know, they want to see him do well in Copa Libertadores, and they want to see mainly the team play as good as they play on the domestic league, play the same style of football in Copa Libertadores. I've had this discussion with a lot of people lately, these last couple of weeks, and a lot of people tell me, no, Copa Libertadores, you play different. We're a Paraguayan team. We got to play more defensive. The other team's going to have the ball a lot more. But Olimpia here is a possession team. It's a team that throws everything at you. It's a very physical team, and they haven't translated that into the Copa Libertadores, and they've had injured Roque Santa Cruz on the first game. He played a few minutes. He's a very important player. Then you have the players that were sent off, Roberto Rojas on the first match. Now the same thing happened on the second match, and you got players that are not, you know, they haven't gotten with the team where they need to get. I believe that Garnero has picked some of these players, like William Candia the other day. Ralph was talking about the left side. He played on that spot, and he didn't have a good game. He tried with another player the other day, with Luis de la Cruz, that he had him before when he was a coach in Guarani. So he knew this player. He said, I'm going to have all my trust on this player. Let's put him in this position where he normally doesn't play. He even used players like Viudes that after he was used in a match, the day after that he left the club. So there's a lot of weird things going on in Olimpia. That there's players leaving also because economic wise it is a problem right now in Paraguay for these big clubs. They can't stand to keep all their players, the salaries. It's a really tough moment for these big clubs in that sense also. So Garnero has to use the young players, and he doesn't really like the young players, I believe, because he has a lot of them and he's not using them, most of them. You have Hugo Fernandez that went in the last game, and a lot of people were saying, hey, Huguito Fernandez is ready to start, and he didn't start. So there's a lot of people are questioning what Garnero's doing in Copa Libertadores, the players he's choosing, and the way his team is also playing.
It really is going to be very interesting to see what happens to this Olympia side in the next few weeks, and of course what happens to Garnero. But we'll talk more of a stability type of club and talk about how Guarani has been doing so far. Impressive draw against Palmeiras at home. Certainly have kind of turned the turn with Gustavo Costas. Okay, it's not been perfect, but you know, Fede, I think Gustavo Costas is definitely a manager that deserves a lot more respect to the general Paraguay fan of the job that he's done so far in such a short amount of time at Guarani.
Yeah, we're talking about 3 Argentinians, right? We said Ramon Diaz, we said Garnero. They all have, you know, they came into Paraguay to make a career out of them. Ramon Diaz, you know, he had a lot to back it up, but in the results in the big games he didn't come through, and Gustavo has a good team. I think they have the intensity above all that you need to play against teams like Brazilian teams or Argentinian teams, and they have a lot of players that are Argentinian. I think they've given it that different touch also in this Paraguayan club, and they have I think they're the most complete team right now in Paraguay. They were the best team playing in their style also right before the pandemic hit, and maybe they didn't have the deep they have depth on the bench that they have now with Cecilio Dominguez, with other players getting healthy also for Copa Libertadores. But mainly they're playing Copa Libertadores like you need to play these matches. Go side to side and not wait for the other team to score first and then try to come back like I'm seeing some Paraguayan teams do, thinking too much about what the opposite team can do to you, but having your own style and keep at it. I think that's the best thing that this Guarani has, and I think that not just because of the results, but because of the way they're playing and the conviction that I see on their players, and just because of the experience that Gustavo Costas also has. He's been in a lot of teams. He was here in Paraguay before. He coached Cerro Porteño, so his knowledge, I think he's on the best moment of his career to have a team like he does with Guarani. He has his son next to him as an assistant coach, but he's the one that makes the decisions. He's the one 100% on top of the team, and I think this Guarani team is ready to do some big things in this Copa Libertadores. I think they've showed it against Palmeiras, above all in this last team. They were very close to winning that game.
And certainly they are very well seasoned, but we go into that game and go to our final segment and talk about one of the standout players, not just, I think, in that game, but for the team that he plays for. And I'm obviously talking about the captain of the national team, Gustavo Gomez. I mean, certainly all you guys have know the importance that Gustavo has had on this team. I mean, he's definitely one of the more, probably the first or second name on this team sheet as captain. He's definitely evolved much more into a mature and seasoned leader in Brazil ever since leaving AC Milan a couple of years ago. And obviously the big question now is, with the World Cup qualifiers coming about, who's his partner? I mean, we see a lot of center backs that are performing. We have Junior Alonso, we have Fabian Balbuena, who's getting the captaincy at West Ham. I mean, Omar Alderete, who's doing stuff at Basel. There's a ton of center backs that can partner Gustavo, but I just want you guys assessment of how Gustavo has been doing so far this year and how important he really is to this national team. I mean, Ralph, go to you first.
Well, I think what you mentioned of going from AC Milan to Palmeiras and the kind of maturity of Gustavo Gomez is spot on. I mean, I think at Milan, of course, he wasn't able to kind of be a leader in that dressing room because you're there with some of these superstars, and he's gone to Palmeiras, and despite his age, he's kind of really has taken on that leadership role, which is something he was doing from very young. Even when he was at Libertad, he was also, I think, captain of the Paraguay under-20s, if I remember rightly, at the Sudamericano, and it was really funny watching him. He ended up partnering with Felipe Melo, and he's telling Melo what to do, and he's shouting at Felipe Melo, and I was like, wow, this is, no one does that to Felipe, but there he was, and probably in Portuguese, I would assume, so he really has that kind of leadership characteristic. He had a great game. I mean, he knows that stadium. They were playing in the Defensores del Chaco, so for him, it's almost like a home game, playing against Guarani there. I saw him having, like, at halftime as they're coming out the tunnel, chatting to all his friends that are in Guarani. So, he was very comfortable there, and I think we'll see a similar display against Peru of that kind of very aggressive, very organizational, and really, I mean, it's like you say, it's who's going to partner him in the defense coming up against Peru. I don't know. It's a shame, of course, that Bruno Valdez is injured, because that would have been another name that we could have been talking about, but he's out. But I think it's probably between Junior Alonso, who's also playing in Brazil, or maybe Balbuena. And Balbuena, what he has going for him is he's played now 2 games, the 2 League Cup games, which has given him a little bit of rhythm and probably for something for Berizzo to talk about.
I don't know what Maria thinks, but I like to see Junior Alonso have a shot. I think we've seen Balbuena play next to Gomez, and I don't know if they really understood each other. Sometimes you think about those guys playing together, and you imagine it, and you say that's the perfect duo right there in the back. But then you put them on the field, and they don't respond, or they don't behave the way you expect. I like to see Junior Alonso. I think he's ready. He's been waiting for that spot. I wanted to see Bruno Valdez also get a shot, but unfortunately he got injured. Like we said on the first episode, Ralph had the news. I think it's not gonna get too far from those two players. Probably Junior Alonso is gonna get the shot, and if not, you got Robert Rojas waiting back there also for his chance. But I think there's a scale in that spot. You got Escobar also coming in. They've been thrown to the side. They've been thrown to the side to play wide open on the right. Escobar, Rojas did it on the national team. They have to wait for their spot in the middle. But there's a spot open right there next to Gomez, which is one of our stars. We have an offensive star. That our offensive star is Almiron, and our defensive star on the national team is obviously going to be Gustavo Gomez. He has the leadership. He's right there on the age, I believe, to be one of the leaders in the locker room also. So I think he's ready. He's been waiting for this moment. He's done the career. He's done the job, and I think he's up there with Gamarra. I think he's up there with the players that have done history in our national team, like Ayala also. And I think he could be a real leader in this team. He's going to need to be one.
I think I also kind of agree with Fede, with Alonso, but I kind of want to see him more with Balbuena. They kind of have that European experience. So maybe they didn't work so well, like you said, but maybe if they get the chance again, they can work it out a little bit better. Especially now that they have these two games in this competition coming up, and it's like a testing game. It's try it out, feel it out, how they feel. So yeah, I wouldn't mind to see him with Alonso as well.
Yeah, I think going on form, you kind of have those two guys of Alonso, and it's good that you mentioned Balbuena as well, Maria, because they were both teammates at Libertad when they were much younger. So clearly they have that knowledge of themselves, but Alonso as well. I mean, you mentioned, Ralph, that he was the captain of that U20 side in the World Cup back in 2013. So clearly he has the leadership roles necessary, and working with someone like Alonso might be better for him just because of them working ever since they were younger players. But I think it's a good thing to have that kind of depth at the defense, that if in case Gustavo is down. I mean, you have a Rojas, you have a Navarrete, you have a Escobar, you have a Balbuena. I mean, that's a good thing, and we know that Paraguay has always been known for their defensive style of play. So clearly, producing that kind of talent has favored them, and it's hopefully that, as Fede said, it is the right moment for him. 27 years old, right in the prime of his career, has already taken the responsibility as the captain in a tournament last year in the Copa America. Now for these type of games, it's time for him to really step up. I mean, that's all I can really say. He's an aggressive one. He is. He can be aggressive at times. Aggressive one. But that's needed. That's needed, I think.
Yeah. I think he's learned that from Felipe Melo, Ralph. I think that way of going, that leadership, but that strong way of going into the ball it's all Felipe Melo. That.
Yeah, there you go. That's spending time with one of those. Maybe one of the hardest players in football, for sure.
I think he'll hopefully not get a red card in any of those games and cause a fight, hopefully. But no, I think he's definitely matured over the last few years. Actually, if you remember, he got sent off in that last game against Venezuela where he lost his head. But in the evolution of 3 years basically, he's really evolved and become much more mature. So again, I think he's the only player that is the leader and is rightly deserving of the captaincy. So given that he's already done that at club level, it's only right that he does it at national team level as well. So we'll just have to wait and see as we heat up, guys. 2 more weeks until the start of World Cup qualifying. I mean, Fede finally has his shirt on. We finally have seen him wear the Paraguay shirt.
Yeah, and you guys took it off. What is this? On the next
No,
episode,
no, but I'm
the
supporting
fuck-
these
please.
guys. These guys are next. These guys are about to be
It's
champions.
laundry
Oh.
day here.
Yeah, there you go.
I told you guys, Roberto had another thing.
I'm with you, Fede. Don't worry.
Yeah, Ralph's the loyal one. He's worn a Paraguay shirt in our first 3 episodes. All credit to him. But before we finish our episode again, and thank you again, we do have to send a special shout out. And Maria, you can go in this one of some cool little graphics that we're about to have, some cool little things. And why don't you just give a bit more information on that?
Yes, super, super thankful for our very dear friend Ricardo Taveras, who is a fantastic graphic designer and video editor. He works a lot with cameras. He's a great professional. So he's helping us a lot with our graphics for the show. And as you can see, we got new logos. We got a cool new thing going on around our boxes. But thank you very much, Ricky. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone as well, that we've gotten a lot of comments. We've gotten a lot of people talking about it. I mean, and guys, we've also influenced a lot of other podcasts as well. We're seeing podcasts, not just of what we're talking about of Paraguay, but we've seen things of Chile. We see things in Peru. I mean, guys, I think we're starting something. We're only 3 weeks old.
I'm impressed. There's a lot of people writing to me. Your friend, your Chilean friend that lives in Canada, he started something similar to what we're doing here about Paraguayan football. He told me that there's a Peruvian also channel about them, all in English. So I'm just so happy that people are taking our idea and making it their own, and that we've had these places for people, these spots for people to hear about their sports, about their favorite sports, soccer, football, all in English. You know, we have so many people in the United States. We have so many people in the UK. We have people all around the world that still want to feel close to their country, but in a new language or in one of the languages that they speak. And this is just a way of getting to them. It's a way for us to get to them also. So just keep joining it and give a subscribe, put up there, and send this link to anybody you know that can actually that can subscribe to the channel. Anybody that you have of your family that's around the world that wants to know about Paraguayan football, like we said on the first episode, tell them about Guarani Vision, because we're going to be on every week.
Absolutely. Maybe English is a universal language to the most of the world, but again, football is the language that we all know, regardless of barriers. So thank you again, guys, for joining us. For myself, Roberto Rojas, for Maria Britos, Federico Perez, and Ralph Hanna, this has been episode 3 of Guarani Vision. Thank you again. See you soon.